Hi everyone, I hope everyone's doing well. My project will be on the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, commonly known as ISIS. The way in which I found out about ISIS was when I was in middle school, as was the case for most people in my generation. We would often see images or videos of ISIS displaying their message and also seeing their atrocities that they committed against people. Another thing that we saw was, for example, one of these, which was President Obama giving a press conference about ISIS, or him stating that the U.S. would lead counterinsurgencies in that area in which ISIS was present. So, a little bit of background about ISIS. ISIS was created in 2004 in Iraq during the Iraq War. Originally, it had only been in Iraq. However, it took advantage of the chaos caused by the Syrian civil war of 2014 to expand and take territory. So, for example, in the image below, in the gray, you see ISIS at its territorial extent, in which they have territory on both sides of the border. ISIS established a new government under a branch of Sunni Islam called, or their ideology was, Salafi jihadism, which is the inevitable, or the, not inevitable, but the future goal, which is to establish a sort of worldwide caliphate in which everyone would adhere to Islam. ISIS was convicted of war crimes and human rights abuses by the United Nations. They were convicted of war crimes due to their treatment of prisoners of war and of human rights abuses of their treatment of women and children, and not only non-Muslims, but Muslims as well. One of the central themes of the class that we see is fundamentalism, which is the strict adherence to the literal interpretation and meaning of religious texts. Within fundamentalism, there exists a sort of idolized past. The idolized past that ISIS follow is that of the original Islamic caliphate and the eventual return of that sort of caliphate in which they were rapidly expanding their territory, not only through Saudi Arabia and North Africa, but in Europe and the Iberian Peninsula, more specifically. Now, another key theme that we see is that they don't see themselves as the perpetrators in this situations, but victims. They see themselves as those that are defending their values. Now, because fundamentalism is a strict adherence to the literal interpretation of religious texts, that is the sort of rule that they follow. One of the religious texts within Islam is the Bukhari, which is a hadith, which is one of the books in Islam in which followers or people that interacted with the Prophet Muhammad recorded what he said. And one of the things that was recorded was him quoting or him stating that the best jihad is the one in which your horse is slain and your blood is spilled. Now, the literal interpretation of this is that there needs to be a sort of conflict or military action in order for this jihad to take place. Now, jihad has many definitions, which is why it's such a gray area. However, to them, they believe that the definition is a holy war in which there is a military conflict against non-Muslims. So that's the sort of theme that you see in ISIS and their moral justification for their actions. So The way in which they're similar to other religious extremist groups is their moral justification. They believe they're morally justified by their religion, or there is a sort of call to action by the religion in order to defend it and also for that inevitable worldwide caliphate. Now, they're similar to other religious extremist groups in their use of violent action, or better yet, their sort of, you could almost say, their willingness to use violence in order to get what they want, which is a common theme within other religious extremist groups. An interesting similarity is a sort of anti-colonialist stance mixed in with religious extremism. Now, to some religious extremists of Islam, they view the United States not only as a threat, but their ideology, because they feel that the ideology of the United States does not align with it. So by taking a sort of anti-religious stance against the United States, they're also taking an anti-colonialist stance as well. Now, ISIS is similar to other religious groups that, in the sense, they are trying to create a sort of religious state and form a state in which the religion is the one, the law of the religion is the law of the land. There are differences to other religious extremist groups in their use of violence, because not all religious extremist groups use violence. Some don't. Some simply try to pursue a sort of political agenda in order for them to create change. They don't necessarily have to be involved in some sort of military war, for example. Now, another key difference to other religious extremist groups, for most specifically that of Christianity and Judaism, is the sort of idea of a return of a Messiah. Some of the religious extremist groups within Christianity and Judaism believe that by sort of creating a situation in which there is a right sort of time and place in which the Messiah may return, that is the sort of inevitable goal. However, with Islam, Muhammad is the last person to have spoken with God and will be the last person to speak with God on planet Earth. So that is a major key difference. And also establishing a religious state, because there are other instances of religious extremism, such as with 9/11, in which it was more specifically just an attack on the United States rather than trying to sort of conquer that land. Now, the future of ISIS is very bleak. They no longer have the territories that they once held, and really they're just a group that commits sort of, well, it's a continuing military conflict, but they no longer have the military that they once had or the resources they once had. And this image is an image of their leader that was killed in 2019, just to sort of emphasize how little leadership and resources that they truly have. However, that isn't to say that in the future there will not be religious extremism within the Middle East or similar ideas that ISIS had. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to my presentation.